Hello, nerds. Nerds for humanity. Today we are going to unpack actually two polls. One is by Ipsos, which goes into the minds of the radical MAGA. Have they moderated since the election? Or do they still stay loyal to their leader, Donald J. Trump? And then as some bonus content, because of the support of our channel members, I just started a subscription to Rasmussen Platinum, which gives me access to crosstab data that will kind of highlight how Americans in general think about Biden and issues facing the country. But before we get started, we need to warm it up with Andrew M.F. Yang himself.
Up with Drew Yang Gang, so I hooked up with Drew Yang Gang, so I hooked up. Yo, there's no place to hide now that he's arrived. I'm saying he ain't playing now with this campaign. Bang, dang, it's and Drew, come roll with the Yang Gang. Drew Yang Gang, so I hooked up with Drew Yang Gang, so I hooked up with Drew Yang Gang, so I hooked up. Yo, there's no place to hide now that he's arrived. I'm saying he ain't playing now with this campaign. Bang, dang, it's and.
Hello, nerds! Nerds for humanity. We have some data today. So this channel has been moving to our full-on nerd roots, doing a lot of policy deep dives and data breakdowns. And I'm just going to say it to be clear, this channel is not the most popular channel on YouTube, but because of our members, because of people who click that join button, we're going to keep producing content because, yeah, you know what? Nerd content isn't for everybody, but it's analysis that needs to be done, needs to be discussed, because we can't just rely on 140 characters and hashtags to kind of unpack complicated issues. So for today's show, we're going to start off with a review of the polling of Republicans to kind of understand how Republicans are thinking about the state of the world, because it's also important for us who are not Republicans to understand how basically, you know, maybe 40% of the country is thinking. So let's get into what they're up to. I haven't looked at this data myself yet, so this will be a surprise for me as well. Hopefully, it'll be a pleasant surprise that maybe the country's starting to come together or starting to agree on some things. But we'll see. All right, so let's go to the first results. And let me adjust here. Move myself bottom right. Okay. So this is the Reuters Ipsos poll. And as you can see here, we'll kind of zoom. Well, maybe not zoom too much because we need to see a little bit more data. Okay, so the first question is right here, 5.1. And just so you guys know, the first column is all. The second column is Dems, the next column is Republicans, and the last column is independents. So would you say you're generally favorable or unfavorable towards Donald J. Trump? And interestingly enough, overall, across everyone surveyed, 1 out of 5 are very favorable. 1 out of 10 are somewhat favorable. And then about half are very unfavorable. There's no one that's like somewhat unfavorable. You either kind of like him or you just really don't like him. And that basically explains how Donald Trump's leadership style has divided this country. If you look among Democrats, almost 80% are very unfavorable of Donald J. Trump. However, For Republicans, 45% of self-identified Republicans remained very favorable towards the man. And 21% are still somewhat favorable, which is kind of, in my opinion, kind of crazy. Like, this guy presided over the most sort of hapless, inconsistent, unaccountable response to a global pandemic from the greatest country, the most advanced, the richest country in the world, where they said that we would only lose 100,000 people. We lost over 500,000 under the leadership of this so-called president. And still, 45% of Republicans are very favorable towards the man. And 21% are somewhat favorable. So 2 out of 3 are at least somewhat favorable. And in terms of how many Republicans feel like Trump did not do a good job or have a somewhat unfavorable or very unfavorable, only 12%. So only 1 out of 8 Republicans feel like he had done somewhat of a bad job. Now, what's most telling, maybe you're listening to this and you're like, wow, whatever, it's partisan. The Democrats hate him. The Republicans love him. They think he's like, Jesus Christ on his 4th marriage or whatever. But independents are this last column, and almost half of independents are very unfavorable. That is this last column here. Make sure can you guys see that? Whoops. Hold on. I'm hoping you can see this. Let's see. Let me zoom out a little bit there. Oh, I see what's going on. Hold on. I'm going to move this guy over a little bit. Okay. Donald Trump. Here's the 42% number that are of independents are very unfavorable towards Trump. And 13% are somewhat unfavorable. So 55% of independents, not of Republicans or Democrats, of independents, are either very unfavorable or somewhat unfavorable. How many independents are very favorable or somewhat favorable? About 21%. So almost twice as high unfavorability ratings from independents about Donald Trump as you see favorability ratings. So basically what you've got here is an explanation of why Trump lost the election. Basically, he held on to most Republicans, who 2 out of 3 love him. He did not win over any Democrats. 85% are either somewhat or very unfavorable. But he really didn't do a great job with the independents, where half of independents are unfavorable and only 21% are somewhat favorable or better. So now, what about Mitch McConnell? Maybe Mitch McConnell, how does he do compared to Donald Trump? Let's see here. Hold on, let me kind of grow this a little bit so you can see more. Okay. Mitch McConnell, overall, only 13% are somewhat or very favorable compared to 34% for Trump. Now, out of Democrats, actually, Mitch McConnell is more popular with Democrats than Trump, than the Democrats have an opinion of Trump. So 84% are somewhat or very unfavorable towards Trump, and 60% are somewhat or very unfavorable towards McConnell. For Democrats, the Democrats lean towards favorable, kind of mixed. They're kind of in this middle between somewhat favorable and lean towards unfavorable, which kind of captures about 70% of Republicans are kind of like mixed on him. Only 4% are very favorable, whereas 45% of Republicans are very favorable towards the former president. And then for independents most often are very unfavorable towards McConnell, but independents are even more unfavorable towards Trump. So 42% of independents are very unfavorable of Trump versus 33% of independents are very unfavorable towards McConnell. Okay, what about Ted Cruz? Ted Cruz for Democrats, about 58% very unfavorable. That's the most popular rating. Among Republicans, only 22% are very favorable towards Cruz, and that compares to 45% being very favorable towards Trump. So Ted Cruz, as much as he tries to kind of embrace that Trump cohort, is not really convincing a lot of Trump supporters that, he's as good as the Donald. In fact, almost 20% of Republicans have a somewhat unfavorable or very unfavorable, and almost 40% lean towards unfavorable towards Ted Cruz. So this is not a good sign for Ted if he wants to someday be considered for the Republican nomination. Now, maybe Ted Cruz does better with independents. For independents, you've got his most popular rating with independents is 31% unfavorable and 43% somewhat or very unfavorable, and then another 2 out of 3 are either lean towards unfavorable or worse. Stat Nerd is saying, I'm curious who the 5% of Dems that have a very favorable opinion of McConnell. Yeah, McConnell, I think Stat Nerd is referring to McConnell on column 2, 5% very favorable. Who knows? Maybe there are folks like in the South, or I guess near Kentucky or in Kentucky, influencing this, or maybe they just know him and they've seen him kind of work the party, kind of advocate for the GOP's kind of long-term party control. I'm not sure. I'm not a big fan of him. But, 5% very favorable Democrats for McConnell compared to, but you know what? There's 6% of Democrats who are very favorable to Trump. So, maybe it's not that crazy. Or no more crazy than the Democrats who like Trump. Now, Ron DeSantis has been talked about as a potential Republican nominee for 2024 as the heir to the radical MAGA throne, assuming Donald Sr. doesn't grace us with his presence again. With Democrats, Ron DeSantis is about 50% somewhat unfavorable or very unfavorable. However, he does have 28% of Democrats who lean towards favorable or better for him, which is not bad. With Republicans, DeSantis actually his number one rating for Republicans is lean towards unfavorable, and 11% are somewhat unfavorable or very unfavorable. So, could DeSantis grab some of this 33% and move them to lean towards favorable? Maybe. And then he would have about, right now, it looks like he's got 39, 40, almost 60% that lean towards favorable or higher. I think his big challenge is the 33% that already lean towards unfavorable, and they're Republicans. For independents, his most popular rating is lean towards unfavorable. Now, when you compare DeSantis and Cruz, independents seem a little bit more open to DeSantis than they are Cruz. If independents do not like Cruz, a third already rate him very unfavorable, whereas only 15% of independents rate DeSantis unfavorable. So, you might prefer to be DeSantis than Cruz. However, let's see, does Cruz do better with strong supporters? Cruz has 22% of Republicans as strong supporters. Well, DeSantis has 23% of Republicans as strong supporters. So DeSantis has more strong Republicans, and he's less hated by independents and less hated by Democrats than Cruz is, at least. So now Mitt Romney, a lot of people, as you remember, hopefully, was the former Republican presidential nominee and ran against Obama and lost. But, who can beat Obama? He was a pretty kind of all-star candidate. But Romney is not doing well with, frankly, either party. With Democrats, only 20% have a somewhat favorable or higher. And then with he's actually more popular with Democrats than Republicans. Only 15% of Republicans have a somewhat favorable or very favorable view. And then independents, not doing that great either. So Romney's kind of in no man's land, not popular with the Dems, not popular with the Republicans, and frankly, not popular with the independents either. It's kind of sad that he's so unpopular with the Republicans because Romney, for the Republican Party that talks about capitalism, like Romney is a 1,000 times more impressive CEO than Trump in terms of like intellectual horsepower and kind of business accomplishments. Actually, Romney was right calling out Russia as one of the biggest threats to the American national security. And a lot of people, didn't take him seriously when he said that, but he was right. But, it is what it is, man. Romney's political future, not looking too great. Maybe he could be, would a Democratic kind of 2024 president maybe add Romney to the administration and a sign of bipartisanship? I don't know. He's not, who the heck is he popular with? So very favorable. He only has 5% of everyone saying very favorable. And 5% of Dems and 4% of Republicans and 2% of independents. So he's kind of like, that might be like a no-win situation there, where why would anybody really want to put their neck out for Romney, which is it's amazing, right? Guy could be in a Republican national convention and people cheering and balloons falling down and talking about Romney as a great president and great defender, blah, blah, blah. And now only 5% are very favorable. Joe Biden. Okay, that's a tale of two politicians here, because Joe Biden actually has 28% very favorable overall and 17% somewhat favorable. So about 45% are somewhat or very. And then if you add the lean, that's 29. It's about almost 60% are lean, favorable, or higher. Within the Democratic Party, you've got over half of Democrats are very favorable. 26% are somewhat. So he's already at 82% somewhat or very. However, with Republicans, Biden is not super popular. He's only got 4% very and 7% somewhat, which kind of makes sense, because if the current modern-day Republican Party still has such a positive view of Trump, then they're not going to like Biden, because Biden is definitely not Trump. Biden's been very active about pandemic mitigation. He's not very flashy. He doesn't start a lot of like random fights. He doesn't like to get into culture wars. He's kind of boring. He's just passing like legislation to help people, to fight the pandemic, to provide economic relief, to invest in infrastructure. Those are not things that Trump supporters really value based on these numbers here, because only 11% have a somewhat favorable or better view. Now, Biden is doing pretty good with independents. He's got 30% of independents somewhat or very favorable. However, he does have 40% of independents somewhat or very unfavorable. So if you compare that to El Trumpo, Trumpo had 65% of independents somewhat or very unfavorable, and he only had 21% of very or somewhat favorable. So again, Biden has around, he's got 30% somewhat or very. So more independents like Biden, and much fewer independents have as unfavorable a view of him as they have of Donald J. Trump. All right, now Kamala Harris, overall pretty popular with Democrats, so 74% somewhat or very favorable. So if you are hoping for someone else in the Democratic Party to get the nomination, this is a little bit of a concern because she is very popular, and she only has 6% of Democrats that are somewhat or very unfavorable. However, among Republicans, she's got 65% somewhat or very unfavorable. And among independents, she has almost 40% unfavorable. So for the unfavorable with Repub and independents, it's 65-40 for Kamala, compared to Biden, where it's also 65 and, almost the same. So the Biden and Kamala unfavorability among Republicans and independents is almost the same. So TLDR and Kamala, pretty popular with the Dems, pretty unpopular with the Republicans and the independents. Okay, here's the big question that I think a lot of us might be surprised or disappointed. I don't know, you can pick your adjective. What comes close to your view of the 2020 election? What comes close to your view? Was it legitimate and accurate? The result of illegal voting and rigging? Or don't know? So among Democrats, 90% say it was legitimate and accurate, but only 27% of Republicans see the results of the 2020 presidential election in the greatest democracy in the country, in the world. Only 27% think it's legitimate. 55% of Republicans today, April 2021, after all of the 100 court cases that the Trump radical MAGA interests brought up and got thrown out, after the Trump Department of Justice said there was no massive fraud, and after no new evidence of fraud has come up, you still have 55% of Republicans considering Joe Biden's presidency the result of illegal voting or rigging. Now, if you look at independents, most of them, 53%, see it as legitimate, but still 21% of independents also see it as the result of illegal voting or rigging. So that's a huge disparity. You got 90% of Democrats saying it was legit, it was accurate, and 55% of Republicans saying no, it was a steal, it was fraud, it was a witch hunt, it was the deep state, the fake news, the Antifa, whatever. So Dennis Taney is saying, well, if our elections are corrupt, we have no democracy. We're officially a banana republic. Well, I guess if you asked Republicans, 55% of them would say that we no longer have a democracy because their candidate lost. And it can't be because they have evidence of fraud unless they're going to argue that every judge that threw out those 100 radical MAGA cases was somehow in on this mass conspiracy to put Joe Biden in office. I don't know. And then when you see 18% of Republicans say they don't know if the election was legit, you might as well add that to, okay, they're basically saying they don't believe it, which means 73% of Republicans. Let's just take a moment here. 73% of Republicans in April of 2021, after all of the court cases, after all of the Trump's own appointed Department of Justice investigations, found no evidence of fraud of mass scale that would affect the results. Still, 73% of Republicans say, I don't know if it was legitimate. So, question 7.1, the 2020 election was stolen from Trump. To what extent do you agree or disagree? 38% of Republicans strongly agree. 22% somewhat agree. So basically 60%. Now, independents, only 24% feel that the election was stolen. Now, what about 2024? Former President Trump should not run in 2024. To what extent do you agree or disagree? Democrats strongly agree that Trump should not run again. Interestingly enough, almost 30% of Republicans, 18 strongly agree that he should not run again, and 10% somewhat agree that he should not run again. So almost a third of Republicans don't think he should run again, and independents, 60% don't think he should run again. So the only people that really want him to run are these 49% of Republicans who say, no, I strongly disagree that he should not run again. Basically, half of the Republican Party wants Trump to run again, and 80% of the Democratic Party does not, and 60% of independents would prefer someone else run for the Republican, run again for president. So if you are a big fan of Donald J. Trump, the question will be, can this 49% take you through to the Republican primaries? Can Trump win the nomination with half of the party wanting him to run again? And the answer is probably. But it seems like, based on the number of independents that don't want him to run again, that he would then, if he were to run for the nomination, he would win the nomination, but wait for it, lose the general election. And then what would the radical MAGA do? They would probably say that, it was rigged, and millions and millions and millions of ballots were found in metal boxes in rivers in Texas, right? So that's a recipe for more division. I mean, if you love America, you probably don't want Trump to run again, even if you like Trump, because if he then loses, it will only split this country further apart. That's obviously my opinion. Okay, who is to blame? Is Trump at least partly to blame for the Jan 6 riot and insurgents kind of trying to break into the U.S. Capitol. This is, remember, this is the Law and Order Party, right? Is Trump partly to blame? 70% strongly agree that Trump is partly to blame, but only 11% of Republicans feel that he's partly to blame, and 40% of independents feel that he is partly to blame, and another 12% somewhat agree. So majority of independents feel that basically Trump is partly to blame for the riots that were trying to disrupt the democratic process of certifying the Electoral College. And again, the irony is that these radical MAGA always talk about how sacred the Constitution is and how we have to respect the Founding Fathers' wishes. Well, the Founding Fathers decided there was going to be Electoral College, and the legislature is going to certify the results presented to it by the states. And to then say, like, oh, well, we don't like the way they're counting, we're gonna break in and kill a policeman and cause a mass evacuation of our own elected representatives, is the epitome of a mob. But yet only 11% of Republicans feel that Trump is partly to blame, despite the fact that he has been, had been the chief advocate for this false narrative, this conspiracy, this debunked fake controversy of the so-called Stop the Steal. So, there you go. These Republicans, they're going to stand by their man, I guess. The people who gathered were mostly peaceful, law-abiding Americans. To what extent do you agree or disagree? 16% believe that the people who gathered at the Capitol were mostly peaceful, and more than half of Republicans believe that the people that gathered at the Capitol were mostly peaceful, but only 25% of independents agree. The Jan 6 riot was led by violent left-wing protesters trying to make Trump look bad. To what extent do you agree or disagree? Wow, I'm surprised. 19% of Democrats strongly or somewhat agree that it was left-wing protesters trying to make Trump look bad. And more than half of Republicans feel that the riot was actually led by left-wing protesters pretending to be MAGA. I guess they dressed up as MAGA and put on the tactical gear and got the Proud Boys and the Oath Keeper patches and everything. But they weren't. They were really supporters of Antifa or the Squad or something. I guess that is the belief from these Republicans. 55% of Republicans somewhat or strongly agree that the Jan 6 riots were led by violent left-wing protesters trying to make Trump look bad. And maybe even more disturbing is 34% of independents believe that too. I guess if that were true, then why are all these longtime Trump supporters being caught on video breaking into the Capitol and getting arrested? Are they under such deep cover that they had been masquerading around as Trump supporters for years just for this one moment? I find that hard to believe. But many, many Republicans believe that the Jan 6 riot was led by left-wing protesters. 55% of them. My God. That explains a lot. The government make it easier for people to vote. In your opinion, is that very important or not important at all? So should it be easier for people to vote? Looks like 93% of Democrats believe that it should be easier for people to vote. Wow. Look at this. This is very surprising. 70% of Republicans, get this, guys, This is kind of a big deal. 70% of Republicans agree that it should be easier for people to vote. So, I know I was kind of hard on the Republicans for blaming Antifa for the January 6th riots, or 55% of them. But out of that same group, 70% of Republicans believe it should be easier to vote, and 69% of independents believe that the government should make it easier for people to vote, which then makes you wonder what in the Sam Hill happened in Georgia, where the Georgia legislature thought it was the right thing to somehow make it harder for people to vote by outlawing voting on certain Saturdays, outlawing voting on certain Sundays, outlawing voting after 9 p.m. or before 9 a.m. on weekdays. Like, why would the Atlanta state government? And we are back. Sorry, folks. Internet connection issues. But if you missed what I was just saying, it's that amazingly surprising that 70% of Republicans think that the government should make it easier to vote. 70% of independents also believe that the government should make it easier for people to vote. And of course, 93% of Democrats feel like the government should make it easier for people to vote. So all of this like voter suppression stuff going on in Georgia that like Lauren Boebert is supporting and Marjorie Taylor Greene are supporting are completely at odds with their own party. I mean, 70% of Republicans feel that the government should make it easier for people to vote. I mean, that's amazing. We finally, as a country, can agree. 80% of all respondents believe the government should make it easier for people to vote, not harder. So if you're listening from the state of Georgia, if you are in the state of Georgia's legislature, you guys went ahead and made it illegal for people to vote before 9 a.m. or after 5 p.m. on weekdays. You made it illegal for people to vote on certain Saturdays and certain Sundays. You made it illegal for people to even request a mail-in ballot too early or too close to the election. And yet 70% of your own party feels that the government should make it easier for people to vote. And 80% of your own country feels like it should be easier for us to vote. So Radical MAGA clamping down and making it harder for people to vote is very unpatriotic, according to this poll. Okay. The government placed new limits on voting to protect elections from fraud. In your opinion, is that very important or not important at all? 30% of, even 64% of Democrats feel that there should be protections from fraud. 87% of Republicans feel that way, and 68% of independents feel that way. So basically, everybody agrees that there should be protection from fraud. Everybody also agrees that it should be easier for people to vote. So that's sort of the key nuance there, right? Like what the people want is they want it to be easier to vote, but harder for actual fraud. And there is a way to do that, but that is not what the people of, or the state legislature of Georgia did. They just said, oh, well, we're just going to make it harder to vote, and we'll chalk that up to preventing fraud. It's sort of like saying, I don't want any more shoplifters, so I'm not going to allow any more shoppers into the store. States have the right to set their own election laws. Is that very important? Sounds like broad agreement from all parties that, yeah, states should set their own election laws, legalize marijuana. That's interesting. 60% of Republicans now favor legalization of marijuana. I don't think I would have said that. If you told me that 15 years ago, I would have been like, they're crazy. The Republicans, like the party of Nancy Reagan just say no. They're not going to be okay with legalizing marijuana. But now 60%. Who knows? Maybe Marjorie Taylor Greene and even Lauren Boebert are for legalizing marijuana. I almost feel like they might need to take a little bit of their edge off. And then, of course, independents are also supportive of legalizing marijuana. Okay. So that was a whistle-stop tour of the poll conducted by Reuters. And as I mentioned at the beginning of this show, I do have a... Whoa, out of focus. Come on, focus. Focus, camera. Well, I'm blurry, but whatever. Maybe I'll... Whatever. This camera. Focus. Sorry. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to take a 30... we'll take a... What we'll do is we're going to acknowledge some of the supporters of this channel that make Nerds for Humanity possible. And my God, this camera is just bugging the crap out of me. Come on, man. So terrible. Anyway, we're going to acknowledge some of the supporters of this channel. And then if you want to stick around, I have another poll, which is done by Rasmussen. And that is going to be talking about a lot of new topics that we haven't hit. But one of them is immigration and what are Americans' views on the state of immigration. Is it a crisis? Do people support comprehensive immigration reform or more, what do people want to see happen under the Biden administration as it relates to immigration? But before we go there, we're going to do two things. We're going to give a quick acknowledgement to the members of the channel, and then we are going to maybe give me like a 2-minute break because I've been talking nonstop for a little while now. So let's thank the members of this channel, because without these members, I wouldn't be making this content. The member support tells me that, okay, yeah, you're not getting a ton of views, but people value this. All right, so here we go. We shall start with our highest level, our VPs. And by the way, if you want to join, now, you can just click that join link. And what'll happen is if you do, you might get lucky and you get a little Andrew Yang congratulations while we're in the live stream, obviously an automated one, but it'll go something like this. I'll tell you what it'll sound like. If you become a member while I'm still streaming, you'll get one of these guys. Yeah.
Hello, nerds.
You get a hello, nerds from Andrew himself. That is his voice. Okay, so let's give a quick thank you to the people that are already members, and then we'll go into the immigration polling. So, hey, Jackalego, good to see you, buddy. All right, VP level. We have VLAM, JM Sap, Fat Lamb, Kristen Slevin, Soldier One. Oops, I'm going to move myself. I must move myself. There we go. Soldier One, Laura Lane, Patrick Dunn, Bike, and Mindful Skeptics. And Bike, I should acknowledge, joined 5 months ago and then upgraded to the VP level. So thank you for that, Bike. Appreciate it, man. All right, the next level down after VP is the hardcore. We have Mike Chang, Gene Lim, David, Tracy, DK, Phoenix, Jackalego, who is in the chat, Kirsch, Mr. History, Byram, Mona, Susan, Yang, Tony, Robert, Dean, Stat Nerd, who is also in the chat, Jalessa, Jay Perrin, Annalisa, Jay Bryan, Vivian, Dana, Flavio, Yoda, and Jason. And woo, look at this. Yoda, Fanny, and Jason are fairly new, so you need a bell for that. Welcome. Welcome to new members. And then our entry level is the verified nerd level. And we'll just read these real quick from the oldest down. Helen, Lisa, Sugar, Albert, Brandon, Yes, Brian, Peter, Arez, Your Mammon, Sophia, Jadwiga, Gail, Shake and Make, Mike, Doris, Emerald, Nell, Lori, Ben, Roger, Lisa, Christina, Vaughn, Rasta, Richard, Jessica, James, Jalopy, Emma, Spirited, Hui, Stephen, Ira, Shoni, Philip, Jameson, Doctor, William, Karen, Monica, Alex, Ardent, Mai, Semery, David, Ender, Brittany, Clyde, Juana, and Sasha. And again, our newest members, less than a month old, are Yoda Fanny, Jason Sherfy, Flavio Lira, and Sasha Alexandra. All right, so now let us look at the Rasmussen polls. And these are polls that you often will hear talked about in the news at the top line level, but being the Nerds for Humanity channel, we like to go a little deeper into the crosstabs, which is only available if you pay Rasmussen a monthly fee. And I just did that because of people who have joined and become members of this channel. So thank you. Or people who super chat. All of that money goes to us producing more content for you. So let's look at the crosstabs here. How do you rate the way President Biden is handling issues related to immigration? And you would see that majority, the most popular rating for Biden on immigration is poor. Poor. And that's the same among males and females. About 50% say poor. Older people are more likely to rate him poor than younger people. And white and other are more likely to rate him poor than blacks. And 81% of Republicans rate Biden on immigration poor, whereas 36% of Democrats are rating him good. And then other is mostly poor. And then conservatives, poor is the most popular. Moderates are poor is the most popular. Liberals, very happy with Biden on immigration. Good or excellent. And then not sure is on ideology. 55% would rate him poor. Under 30K, rate him poor on immigration. 30 to 50, rate him poor. 50 to 100, rate him poor. I mean, basically, Biden is only doing well on immigration for liberal Democrats. And that kind of aligns with where I would see. Like, I kind of feel like, is he being more humane? Yes. But, you know, Druck11 is saying the only thing Trump should run for is the toilet. It's funny. But yeah, Biden on immigration, nicked good, man. Nicked good. Some people think he's doing a decent job. I mean, you could 35%, 1 in 3 people think Biden is doing a good job, but most people don't. Most people think that Biden is not. And maybe that's why he's replaced his immigration kind of czar person and asked Kamala to lead the way. And I mean, if you're a Kamala supporter, like, I don't know if that's the plum assignment you were hoping for, but you know, hopefully we as a country can figure something out, because clearly you can't do nothing, and you also can't cage people. Is there a middle ground? I hope we can find it. That's just my opinion. How would you rate how Biden is handling economic issues? Okay, on that front, he's doing way better. over 50% think he's either doing good or excellent. But interestingly, 46% say that Biden is handling economic issues poorly. And when you break that down by party, 74% of Republicans think that Biden is handling the economic issues poorly. It's like, well, what would you want him to do? Like, he's just passed this giant stimulus. He's proposing this huge infrastructure bill. And the Republicans were, it's been a long time since Republicans ever talked about the national debt. Like, certainly when it was cutting taxes for corporations, they didn't care about the national debt. So why would you care about the national debt if you're trying to invest in infrastructure and provide money in the hands of people through a stimulus? But at any rate, that is a reality check for the Biden supporters, that even if you thought Biden was doing a really good job on economic issues, know this, that 74% of Republicans think Biden is doing a poor job, and of independents, a little bit more kind of split, where you've got 47% saying he's done a good job and 46% saying he's done a poor job. And then with Democrats, you've got pretty strong 71% saying he's doing good to excellent. But still, 20% of Democrats think that Biden is doing a poor job on the economy. That's kind of surprising. Oh, T.T is saying, I just joined. Oh, did you just become a member, T.T? Let me go look here. Under, if I refresh this page, it should show you as a member. Membership, see all. You're not showing up yet. Hold on. Maybe you'll show up briefly, T.T. But thank you for becoming a member if you did. Appreciate it. Okay. So that's the... Oh, T.T says, just join the stream. You can become a member later if you want, T.T. All right. How do you rate... what's the next question? Let's see. Those were... Let's see the trends. Rating of Biden on the issues. How do you rate the way Biden is handling immigration? We talked about that. 50% poor. Economic issues, almost 50% poor. Wow. But 23 excellent, 19 good. And then let's see if what's this presidential snapshot? Ooh, over time. Love it. This is cool. Approval rate of Biden. Last month, strongly approved was 33, and on April 9th, it's still 33. Disapprove went from 40 to 41. So total approved went from 50-50. So Biden's holding up. He's not getting more popular, but versus a month ago, he's just as popular. And then what about from Democrats? Actually, well, 11% of Republicans strongly approve, but 66% of Republicans, 11% of Republicans strongly approve of Biden, and 66% strongly disapprove, which is obviously a problem. With men and women, he's got more strongly disapprovers for men than women. More strong disapprove from whites than blacks. Right track, wrong track. Wow, this is crazy. Only 40% of the country feel that we are on the right track. That is crazy. I would think that we are on a path to recovery. And only 20% of Republicans think we're on the right track. I remember when, under President Trump, a vast majority of Republicans thought we were on the right track. So they must believe that because Trump lost and now you've got Biden in there, somehow the country has dramatically changed for the worst. And as far as I'm concerned, what do? We got record number of vaccinations. We have clear guidance on COVID mitigations. We have a major economic stimulus bill passed. We have a major infrastructure bill proposed. What's not to like? I mean, the main thing for me, for Biden, is like I would love to see more leadership on solving this immigration stuff, because it is a crisis. Like, if you ask me, and we're going to have an immigration expert on the live stream in a few weeks from a nonpartisan think tank to talk about, the history of immigration in this country and the current trends we're seeing and what the different solutions are. But my view is that, well, we don't have capacity for unlimited immigration, right? So therefore, there have to be rules, and those rules should be enforced. Otherwise, like, why have them? And if you don't like the rules, then change the rules, but don't not enforce them. On the other hand, don't enforce them in such a way that it's punitive and inhumane. At least that's my take. Now, men versus women, equally pessimistic. 40% of men think that we're on the right track, 40% of women. 50% of blacks think we're on the right track, whereas the opposite, only 40% of whites think we're on the right track. So it's kind of flipped there. And here you have the approval rating over time. Interesting. This is comparing, I guess, the same time that Trump was in office versus Biden. And you see here that Biden has approval rating of 49. At this time in the Trump presidency, he had an approval rating of 53. And then in February of Trump's first term, he had an approval rating of 52 to Biden's 51. And then in mid-February, Trump had 55 to Biden 53. And we fast forward to now in April 7th of 2021, Biden is now more approved than Trump. So it looks like Trump was more popular than Biden all the way up until March. And then after about 3 months of Trump, this is probably when all the people started quitting the Trump administration, or I guess he fired them. And they were all the beginnings of the controversies. Then you start seeing the blue line kind of trending down, which is the Trump approval. And the green line is Biden's approval. It's kind of just held up. Hasn't really gone up, hasn't gone down that much. But the blue line, you see, is just kind of starting to trend downward in the Trump years. That's the total approval. And then the strongly approve versus disapprove. So you have strongly disapprove here for Biden, and then strongly approve here. And obviously, if you're Biden, you'd prefer that your green line would be higher than the red line. Presidential job approval overall. So this is under Trump, and this is under Biden. Not a huge difference. Obviously, Trump had really low presidential approval ratings during the first, the first surge from the global pandemic, from COVID-19, where his approval rating dipped to about 45%. But, Trump, when he left, he still had an approval rating of like 47. And, it looks like Biden has an approval rating of 48. So it's not like people love Biden. Let's see. I think that covers most of the topics I wanted to hit. Let me know if you guys have any questions for me. We can do a quick Ask Me Anything, or we can... Oh, now the camera has decided to focus again. Thank you, camera. You can ask me anything, or we can hit any topics that you want to hit that I haven't already. And while I'm waiting for those, or we wrap up, I just want to say thank you again to all the channel members for supporting this content. If you can't click the join link because financially, like, not in a position to do so, or you like the channel but you don't like it that much, what you can do is you can make sure you're subscribed. You can hit the bell. You can click the thumbs up to like it, and you can share it. Those are great ways to support this content. It, basically helps more people discover what we're doing here and sharing data. And hopefully we can get to a place where, more people are focused on numbers and not just kind of emotions. But I will show you some of the latest stuff that I have been talking about on Twitter, because I do feel like oh, by the way, you can follow me, Nerds for Yang, on Twitter. Here's what I've been talking about on Twitter. Let's see, because some of it is kind of interesting. All right, so follow me, Nerds for Yang. Let's see. Well, one thing is, if you are supporting Yang for NYC mayor, I did a summary of how he's doing in the mayoral race and all of the numbers behind that. Basically, he's doing good, but he doesn't have it locked in. Oh, this was pretty crazy. This is kind of trending. 200,000 views. This is a woman in Florida that was basically very angry at, I think, a Egyptian American Muslim woman who works in the store and at Walgreens. Oh no, she was shopping with her husband at Walgreens in Florida, and then she I guess got into encountered this other woman, and then this ensued. So let's watch it together.
Muslims, kiss my
I'm not sure about this music. Sorry for... I thought it was just going to be video. Let's see if we can get to the actual without the... Yikes. So that is an example of, it doesn't represent everyone in Florida, but my goodness, this did happen in Florida at a Walgreens. We don't know what precipitated this rant, but it certainly seems like whatever happened, maybe they cut the line or they disagreed over parking spot or whatever, to just kind of start calling people ugly and saying, like, the Israelis rule because you're ugly and, you're not human because you're Muslim. It seems quite hateful and divisive. And I don't know if this person is a Trump voter or a Biden voter, but she's an American. And this is the views that she has. So I put that on my Twitter to kind of increase awareness. Oh, and then Representative Matt Gaetz, he was saying, he was basically playing victim in some ways. And here's Gaetz, who is being accused of, I think, trafficking in minors and using Venmo to pay them for sex, and then marking it as tuition. But he's saying, I may be a canceled man in some quarters. I may even be a wanted man by the deep state. But I hear the millions of Americans who feel forgotten, canceled, ignored, marginalized, and targeted. I draw confidence knowing that the silent majority is growing louder every day. That's pretty rich. That's pretty rich. I mean, there was a time when the Republican Party was the party of family values. And now it's the party of, well, don't mind what I've been doing because I hear the people who have been canceled and marginalized, and I speak for the silent majority, so I can do whatever I want, I guess. But I believe that Matt's friend who procured the underage women, allegedly, has decided to cooperate with the FBI and is providing Venmo receipts and text message history. And maybe some audio, so who knows. Do you guys think that Matt Gaetz is going to be gone? I would imagine if he were kind of a man of any sense of shame, he would probably resign, right? But I don't think he's going to. So the question is, will he be primaried? And if that man gets reelected, it's like, wow, Donald Trump has really changed the game, as they say. I don't know, for good or bad, you guys can decide. This is an interesting stat around COVID cases in the world. And you can see here that between beginning of March and today, the 7-day average number of COVID cases, there's been 135 million cases reported since Feb 29 globally. Now, you might be thinking like, well, no big deal. We're here in the U.S., our case rate's flattening. But, the longer that COVID persists or even grows in the rest of the world, or in Michigan, or so, I think something like 20 or 30 states in the U.S. have increasing cases. The longer this thing persists, the more likely it can mutate and replicate. And even if you did get the vaccine, it's not guaranteed that you're going to be able to handle all the latest mutations or the double mutations. So this is why this pandemic, I don't know, man. It might be hard. Like, there are still parts of the world where, like, people get polio. So it's hard to stamp these things out. And certainly when some countries like Brazil are way behind on vaccinations because their president was saying, oh, there's nothing to be afraid of. Don't be fearful. That's just kind of a concern. So even if you got your immunization, please remember to continue to mask and distance until we get a little bit more out of the woods. Like, as an example, if you look at COVID stats just in the U.S., and we look at national, it's flattened, right? I mean, it's not like spiking like it did around Christmas and Thanksgiving, but it's still higher, guys, than it was. Like, we had daily cases of 70,000 back in July at the peak of the summer kind of surge, and we're now at 64,000. Oh shit, 80,000 on April 8th. So this is we're not out of the woods here. And then if you look at certain states, I think Michigan's an interesting one. Look at Michigan. I mean, look at that, man. Remember all the whole liberate Michigan, free Michigan from COVID lockdown? They now have 7,000 new cases on April 10th, which is almost as much as they had back in the winter, in December of 2020. So this is not a good trend, folks. So I know the lockdown sucks and distancing sucks and masks are very inconvenient and not as comfortable as free-facing. But when you've got numbers like this, I mean, these translate into deaths, okay? Like, look at this. Like, yesterday, there were 81 people just in the state of Michigan that died of COVID. And in the U.S. overall, I mean, we had 1,000 people die on April 8th. And on April 9th, almost 1,000 as well. And luckily, April 10th is a little better, but this is still more people dying now than there were dying in September. So, you know, be vigilant, folks. And if you haven't gotten vaccinated, please try and get vaccinated whenever it's your turn. Just as a PSA, I don't qualify in California because right now I think we're still 65 and older. But I went to my drugstore, local drugstore, and the pharmacist, and I asked to be put on the disuse list, the wait list, for basically when they have appointments where they get no-shows, but they have opened up the main vial that has like only some number of hours before they have to discard it. So if you have time, you may want to consider asking to be put on a wait list and sort of being at the ready. And I asked 3 times and over a period of about 3 or 4 weeks. And after the 3rd time I asked, I got lucky and they said, oh, actually we do have a vial that was opened this morning and we have a couple more doses and we've called everybody on the wait list and nobody can show up in time. And I was like, hey, sign me up, you know? So hopefully you can consider that. Another thing in the news was a maskless Florida woman. All right, so this is a lot of these Florida news stories. Purposely coughed on a customer, gets 30 years in jail. So apparently this was at a store in Pier 1. Golly. Sorry, guys. Oh, my God. This ad is going to be 22 seconds. So basically what you're going to see is the person holding the camera and the woman in the store disagreeing over something. And then the woman in that's being filmed starts giving the one-fingered salute to the person holding the camera. And then you'll see what she does.
Do you really need this? What do you want to do? Post it for you? How about that?
Oh, double fisted.
I think I'll get real close to you and cough on you then. How's that?
Ooh.
Asshole.
No. Pier 1, man. Pier 1 and Walgreens. Crazy. All right. So that happened. But now she's going to jail for 30 days. Good for her. Then there was this news thing about, the New York Times saying that Andrew Yang is a moderate and that New York City progressives are very disappointed that a moderate is at the top of the polls. And I think when they say moderate, they say he's not a good old party Democrat. You know, he's not dyed in the wool decades, you know, in the political party establishment and in the bowels of city government. But I think that's why people like him, that he's coming with fresh ideas. But to call the guy who's proposing $1 billion UBI pilot for the poorest New York City residents a moderate is a little bit of a stretch, but that's how the New York Times is referring to him. And then President Trump gave a talk around, top donors in Florida. And basically they were saying that people are just kind of tiptoeing around him because they don't know if he's going to run again. This happened in my neck of the woods, the Golden Gate Bridge. The Bay Bridge. All of the Bay Area bridges will no longer have toll takers. There used to be humans that were in jobs where they would receive the tolls, and those have all been automated. And I was saying, someone should run for president, talking about how technology will affect the job market. This is the whole progressive thing. We talked about that. And then I did a bunch of Ask Me Anythings. And let's see. Can you help stand up for nuclear power? Yes. How would you feel about $2,000 a month in UBI? I'd feel great because everybody has a floor and the money isn't wasted on government programs. Do you see how hypocritical the Republicans are for covering Getz and chastising Franken? Yes. I was a big Franken supporter. Actually, I was hoping he would run for president back in, like, I think 2018. I was thinking, man, he'd be cool. What is your primary profession? Basically, I work in technology. What do you think about nuclear plants? I'm for them as long as they can be made safer and smaller. Favorite cheese? Sharp cheddar on a burger. Have you been asked any truly deep questions that made you question your worldview? Yes, someone actually at work asked me last year, what's your leadership style? And they asked it in like a way of like saying the current style is not working. And I was like, wow, that was kind of like a splash of cold water. Should I stop smoking? Yes, you should. I quit. It was hard. I had to use a nicotine patch, and it took me multiple attempts. But if you look at the data, smoking, overeating, lack of exercise, lack of sleep, lack of water are basically like the highest kind of leverage actions you can take to stay healthy. Do you have an exercise routine? Yes, I just got back, got a Fitbit at Charge 4, and I'm trying to hit 25 active fat burning minutes per day. And I think it's starting to work. I think you see a little bit less double chin. I don't know if you guys can notice that. Where do I think the U.S. is heading? I'm optimistic. We're trending in the right direction, but we need to raise our game around climate, education, and poverty. What are my thoughts on vaccine passports? As long as cases are elevated, I think private companies should require them if they want to relax masking and distancing requirements for their customers. Now, if you don't want to do the ask for the vaccine proof and you just want to maintain the current social distancing and masking requirements, that's fine. But you can't say, oh, we're open for business, 100% capacity, no mask, no distancing, but we also don't care if you've been vaccinated. I would think like you should at least be vaccinated or have proof of that you previously had COVID to reduce the chances of you kind of infecting the whole customer base. You did a great job covering the Yang 2020 campaign. Would you have done anything differently? Yeah, I probably would have produced more content specific to Iowans and New Hampshire voters. Why do you think no one in politics discusses a fairness doctrine? And I said, I think radical MAGA would go crazy if we tried that. So, at any rate, I know it's the weekend, so I just want to thank everybody for joining me for this stream. Before you go, can you hit the like button? Can you do me a solid and hit that like button? And if you haven't subscribed, subscribe. And if you thought this data was useful, share it on Twitter and Facebook and let your friends know. And thanks again to everybody who hit the join link and became a member of the Nerds for Humanity Nation. With that, I'm going to say goodbye, happy Sunday, and see you next time. Fade to black.